I think his desire, speaking of Zachary Beck, is clear. He took the wrong route. He's not on the straight and narrow. He's a criminal operating within a network.
As the season progresses, audiences kind of learn that Beck, it poses you as kind of way more sympathetic than maybe the normal villain. And my first thought was like it could be conveniently leaving out all the terrible stuff your character has probably done off screen. Would you
Hmm.
say that despite how the show starts to frame you towards the end of its run, would you say Beck is still a terrible person that's done some really really bad stuff off screen?
Well, again, I go to that sort of. No, that's a great point. And again, I haven't seen the season. You have that advantage. I mean, I know what we made, and certainly I understand the story. But I think, not to get too heady, but those choices and those parameters that give me a lot to play with. So I think it's about sort of humanizing the dark side of him, because you see that he goes to that length, right? He's got a darkness to him. He's got a complete cover, right? He's not a rug exporter importer. He's operating with this criminal network, but he's also, his life is at risk. So there's a great, um, again, there's a lot of conflict there. He's conflicted about will he stay alive within this network of bad guys, right? So, I think the hunger and the desire of a criminal is there. But it's that thing where it's like, the hunter becomes the hunted too. As we see, there's going to be a role reversal later in the season that unfolds, and that was interesting too. So I think if you pair that and layer it with what we spoke of, I mean, what he's trying to do with his son, I think this is a guy who's trying to forgive himself. This is a guy who is still hustling and trying to make his money and trying to maintain his lifestyle and this cover, if you will, the whole estate and the whole thing. And I think that comes crumbling down, as we'll see later in the series. But the interesting and the more compelling stuff, I think, relates to the son and that relationship with his son, and the idea of exploring a guy who's trying to reconnect, to make amends, to redeem himself to his son, and to forgive himself. And I think that's something that we often don't talk about in life. But it's like the fear of success versus the desire for success. Success and failure. Interesting stuff. Um, Interesting stuff. So with this character, I had all that range to play with Russ. He's a dark guy, but I wanted to see some light in that darkness. And at the same time, I think what humanizes him, and hopefully what will to audiences, is that, he misses his son. He realizes that he fucked up and that he wasn't there for him. And now his son is a man. And what are the requisite effects of that, having not been there for him? So I think that kind of dual exploration has made it really interesting for me as an actor, that I knew I had all that range to play with. And that also affected my choices too earlier in the season. I didn't want him to feel like he was so beholden to Reacher that he sort of needed him too much. And at the same time, he enlists him for support. He needs the help. So they need each other in a way, which is also interesting. So yeah.
We keep mentioning the son, is a very strong element of this story. And interestingly enough, kind of towards the end of before Reacher betrays you, there is a moment where Beck is like, well, he does seem to get scared that Reacher's getting too close to his son, and not in like, oh, he's gonna betray me. It seems more in like an insecure, like, hey, that's
Right.
my role, my job. Doesn't matter who
Right.
you are to me. I should be in that space. Is he
Right.
truly getting that? Like, is he truly getting really insecure about not being the one that his son is going to?
That's a great point. Again, just in the context of life, yeah, like what is a threat, right? Like he feels threatened by that. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's another interesting turn in the latter half of the season. You're right that he feels like, wow, maybe this guy is becoming a better friend than I could ever be a dad to my own kid. And I think that is also a source of conflict. And you're right, that's something that we touch on as well. So again, all this is really rich stuff to play with as an actor. And again, it affects your choices because you don't want to give it away to the audience. You want to do something that's so obvious and they go, okay, that guy's, how many people, we all have that girlfriend, wife, or buddy that will watch something and they're going to get to the third act and tell you how it winds. You know what I mean? Everybody's like, you know, casting out or projecting their ideas of how it's going to wind up. So with this, yeah, I mean, it gave me a lot of room to play because again, as you think one thing, I want to make sure that I was providing options for him, meaning Nick Santora, for his cutting, where you keep the audience guessing. So that gave me a great means to kind of play in different directions. Yeah,
By the end of the season, sadly, Zachary Beck is not long for this world. He stands up to Quinn and saves his son, but in doing so does die. So just for you, I was wondering, do you feel that that scene kind of completes his redemption arc?
great question. And again, you're the one who's seen it. So if you don't mind, I would defer to you first. What did you think? How did it play?
No, I think it did. I think it worked really
Yeah,
well.
good.
I mean, I
Oh,
did think
good.
about the fact that like, this person may still have done some super terrible stuff off screen. But I do think within the context of the story it was telling, it did complete the arc and was a nice little note for him and the son.
I love what you just said. Make that my quote, will you, Russ? I'm just kidding. Listen, one thing just popped into my head. I'm a big reader. Years ago, I read this quote of Chaplin's. It was a really interesting quote. He said, "Life is desire, not meaning." And it's interesting. You can read that different ways. I think his desire, speaking of Zachary Beck, is clear. He took the wrong route. He's not on the straight and narrow. He's a criminal operating within a network. But hopefully, the more personal notes that you just articulated that beautifully. I mean, yeah, it's sad. I mean, that's one of the first rules we learn, I guess, in high school drama, right? A classical comedy ends in a wedding, going back to Shakespeare, or in a classical drama ends in a death. And sadly, as you said, Zachary's not long for this world, but I hope I did a good job and it's compelling, and it is sad. Yeah, I mean, he's taken out by Quinn, and then the whole thing with the gun comes to life, and you see, and there's a sort of sad, pathetic quality to that too, that it goes back to his childhood, that when he was running around the woods, and that gun had been given to him, and that becomes the tool for his own demise, right? I mean, it's very, very interesting. I love what Nick did with it and adapting that from the book. And
Is that how it all works out in the book? Having not read the book, are all those pretty much similar
no, I
beats?
don't think, I'm trying to recall now. I can't. Oh, it's been over a year. I can't remember the ending at the moment. I mean, like I said, the omission of the wife was one thing, but I'm trying to remember. I think the gun thing is used, but anyway, just the sadness of that. There's a sort of pathetic quality to it that ultimately what he won't live to see is more years with his son, or becoming a better father to him for those reasons. Um, and that's a sad twist to this. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Again, true to dramatic form. He's the death. He is the he's he meets his demise, and ultimately the whole thing with Brian T's Quinn character is incredible. Brian's a great actor. He did a great job with that. And as you see, I mean, he comes out of the shadows, and we realize all this time this guy wasn't who he purported to be. He wasn't the boss. He was an underboss at best, and that he was rife and riddled with complexities and vulnerabilities and all kinds of very human, relatable things. The desire for power, um, you know, the desire for family or the loss of, really interesting themes, I think.
Do you think Beck would have turned over, and if he survived, would he have turned over a new leaf, or would he probably have wiggled his way back into arms dealing? Because that's what he knows.
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. No, I do, because I think I enjoyed working with Johnny a lot, and I think that, like I said, I had my first child during the making of this, who is 20 months old now, and just because of the strike and other reasons, it wound up coinciding with the first year of his life. So I had so much to draw from the idea of when you have children. I don't know if you are a father yet, but just that it gives you fresh eyes, and it gives you a renewed purpose and meaning. It brings meaning to your life, quote, certainly family. So all those things that were applicable that I'm now experiencing. Here I am, 56, with an
Right.
almost 2-year-old. It's kind of a trip. But I mean, I could draw from that. That became a wellspring because I suddenly was a father and I knew how that
Mhm.
felt. So that was really, it gave me meaning and inspiration.